Good evening, everybody. Welcome to episode 62 of the Thrifty Marketer Talks. Today, we will be talking about PR or public relations efforts, right? Our topic today is maximizing PR efforts on a tight budget. We will be discussing about strategies and tactics for 2023. Before that, let me introduce my guest. I know him for several years now. He's one of my favorite folks with a strong personality. One of the stories I would like to start off with. We are connected on Facebook for several years now. There was some political thing going on in US, and I commented on it from my understanding, and a lot of people started attacking me on Facebook. Not attacking me, they're saying snarky comments and all that. Then my guest, whom I will introduce shortly, he stepped up and said, "Come on, guys, back off. He's a nice guy. He has the heart at the right place." From that day onwards, I have immense respect for him, and I look at his work closely and the way he shares insights on public relations. I've never ever heard from anybody. So today I have Jeremy Knuaff. He ran a digital marketing agency for over a decade until a health crisis destroyed his business and nearly killed him. After spending 2 years on his deathbed, that's quite a comeback story if you meet him right now. He relaunched his agency, but unfortunately, since he had been gone for so long, had no current client case studies or examples of work, he was essentially forced to start over from scratch. He knew he had to rebuild his authority status in the marketing industry quickly, and he leveraged public relations to do that. That's why he walks the talk, right? So he began working to get featured in the media for his expertise, and at the same time began writing for several media outlets, and long before had shot past his previous level of success. This was when Jeremy realizes the tremendous impact public relations can have on a business, and it was also when he pivoted his agency to focus entirely on PR. Today, he helps legitimate experts get featured in the media so they can become a recognized authority in their industry, have a greater impact in the world, attract more clients, and earn more money. He also shares his knowledge on PR and marketing through writing, speaking, podcasts like this, television, social media, and mental telepathy. So without further ado, let me just bring him on. Hello. Hey. How are you doing?
I am outstanding, man. How about yourself?
I'm good. I remember we scheduled this 3 months ago, and something happened. You had to travel. I'm glad you are here, and I can't wait to dig in. So, Jeremy, I've curated a set of questions. It's about PR on a tight budget, etc. So I've curated a set of questions. If you're ready, we can jump in.
Ready whenever you are.
All right. So let's start off with the first and foremost question. You might be getting hundreds of them every day. Like, what are the most effective PR strategies for businesses with limited budgets?
Well, I don't know that there's necessarily a most effective strategy per se. I think the biggest thing I would look at if you're trying to really look at saving cost, right? Because PR can get very expensive very quickly, especially if you're hiring an agency, a PR firm, whatever, and you hire the wrong one and they don't get the results. Well, that can add up really fast. Right. PR is frankly very difficult. It's very time consuming, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Part of it is it's always been that way to a degree. And that's actually a good thing, because that means there's a bar set, right? They're not just going to feature everybody just because they want to be featured. Otherwise, there'd be no value in it. But when they're featuring somebody, whether it's a full-blown feature, saying, hey, this is the greatest person in the industry and here's all the reasons why they're awesome, or, something more common where they're doing an article about a particular topic and then they're citing you within that article. Either of those things, the media, the journalists or the producers, the editor, whoever's handling that, they want to know that they're getting someone who is legitimately an expert, because they need to provide that value to their audience. They need to teach them or give them the information that's useful to them. Right. But beyond that, like, let's say they hypothetically feature somebody who's not an expert. not only does that hurt their audience, but it also hurts that journalist because now they've just put somebody out there who's not legit. There's a great case of that, which you saw, I think it was sometime last year when I outed that guy.
Yep.
And as a result, when people found out who he really was, all of the media features he had ever had, poof, gone overnight. And he's now actually blacklisted in the media. And for your audience who's not familiar with the story, the short version is this guy, he was a military veteran, but he greatly exaggerated his story as to what he did. He was actually just a guy who was here in the U.S. He never deployed. He never did anything, but he played himself out like this great war hero. And then he used that to leverage into business and conned people out of, at this point, the numbers we've seen is somewhere up around $12 to $15 million, right?
Wow.
So yeah, he was using PR in a very bad way to basically con people. But once he got caught and the media found out about it, essentially all of the coverage was gone. New negative coverage about him popped up, and he's essentially blacklisted. Nothing positive is ever going to be written or aired on TV about him because the media knows. And that's one of the things that can happen. So that's why it's really important to actually be an expert. Do not overstate your capabilities, your experience, the things that you have done. That's something that I do see people do often. And usually it starts off in a fairly innocent way. It's like, well, I won't be interesting enough or exciting enough if I just say what I've done. That's not really true, right? Like, they just want to know that you have the expertise to answer the questions. You don't have to be the founder of some multi-million-dollar company. There's a lot of great people out there with great knowledge and insight that they can share with the audience. They just want to know that you're legit. So I think that's one of the most important things is actually, doing or presenting yourself in a way that's accurate.
Correct.
The next thing you need to do is take control of your online image. Now, you've got deep SEO background, so you know the importance of this. I suspect many of your audience does as well, but it gets a little more nuanced. So what we want to do is we want to control what comes up in the search results when somebody searches for our company name,
right,
and our personal name, because that personal brand is incredibly important in general, right? Like that's a thing. I know you and I have talked about that a bunch. The personal brand really matters in marketing today. But it's especially important when you're trying to do PR, because if you're pitching or PR agency is pitching for you, those journalists are going to go look you up online, right? Is what they find going to give them a good impression? For most people, the answer is no, right? They don't really actively do the things they need to do to make the right things rank, right? So, I mean, you've got your personal brand website. You should own your own personal name as a domain. You should work with a good SEO firm to make sure that ranks well.
Right.
Your social media profiles, of course, those are probably going to rank for your personal name, but also any of the media coverage, right? So if you've got a website, you should have both a company and a personal website. Make sure you have a press page on there. And then those links from those two websites are going to help those pieces of publicity rank better as well, right? All of the content you're putting out on social media, that plays a role. That's going to affect how people perceive you. When I talk about things on social, I'm talking about publicity. I'm talking about business. I'm talking about veterans issues as well. But I've got a core set of topics that I'm talking about, and it's always within that realm. I'm not just talking about every random thing out there. So these are some of the things you can do there. And then the other side is, and this is especially important if you're kind of taking a DIY approach to PR, is really focus on building and nurturing those relationships with the media. I see a lot of people, they will go out there and they'll pitch their story, and they think it's a numbers game, right? And a lot of time, and from the SEO industry, we can understand how this works, because it in some ways it's similar to link building, right? You send out pitches, and with link building, it is truly a numbers game. You and I know some people that are sending out, in some cases, millions of emails for that.
So true.
Right. So that's not the case with PR. It's not a numbers game. It's a relationship game. And a lot of times you could have the best story in the world. It fits perfectly what that publication typically covers. It's a great story for that particular journalist, but for whatever reason, it's not a fit right now. So where I see people go wrong when they're trying to do it themselves is they'll send a pitch, they'll get no response, which is incredibly common, even for experienced people who do this every day, just because the journalists are so overworked. So just build and nurture those relationships, because then what happens is when your email pops into their inbox, they recognize it. Now they're more likely to open it. And those relationships make all the difference in the world. Great example of this was, I've got a good friend of mine. You may know who I'm talking about when I say this, but she's a publicist as well. World class, great friend of mine, somebody I trust and consider a mentor. She had pitched, I had introduced her a while back to a TV anchor at a local news outlet. She pitched a story that was perfect for the outlet, perfect for the journalist. It was newsworthy based on what was going on in the news cycle right now. It was like a perfect thing that everyone was talking about. And she pitched, she followed up a few times, zero response. Now, it was a solid pitch. I read the pitch. It was great. There was literally nothing that she did wrong. And this is a woman who's been doing this for longer than I have. She's been doing this for 20, 30 years.
Wow.
So she mentions it to me, and I was like, well, do you want me to reach out to that journalist? Which that journalist was a personal friend of mine. That was why I sent the introduction to connect them. And she's like, yeah, I'd appreciate that if you don't mind. So I, texted the journalist. I was like, hey, what do you think about a story on blah, 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 blah? And she's like, I love it. Let's do it. Like, boom, that fast. So that just highlights the importance of the relationships, right?
Absolutely.
When you've got those relationships, it's an absolute game changer. So I think those are really the three biggest things that somebody who's brand new to this can think of, right? We want to be fully authentic. We want to take control of our online image, and we want to really focus on building and nurturing those relationships.
Right. I completely agree with you when you say people pitch and then think that it doesn't work. I've heard it from companies, from entrepreneurs. They try pitches one time and they give up. They're like, it's not going to work. I'm not going to try it anymore. Relationship building is tough. It's like your personal relationship. You need to invest in it, time and energy to get it done. Cool. That's the first question out of the way with such a beautiful answer.
Thank you.
Let's talk about social media, right? Social media is playing a vital role these days. So how can businesses utilize social media to their advantage in PR efforts?
So there's a few things you can do. So we touched on part of that in the previous question, where you want to be very selective in what you're posting, right? Look, I mean, social media it's not just a business tool. It's where we connect with our friends and family and whatnot. But if you've got a personal brand, and you should, then on that personal brand, you need to be very selective and curate what you post. Everything that you post plays a role in how you're going to be perceived. So, that does not mean it has to be dry and boring. That's the other extreme of the spectrum, where people will be very just unoriginal, uninspiring, because they're worried about maybe somebody getting offended. Look, we've all spent time on social media. I don't care what you post. Somebody's going to get offended somewhere. So you just have to do what really aligns with you and your personal brand. What do you believe? What matters to you? You post that. Yes, you're going to turn away some people, and that's part of building a brand, right? Like, think about it. Like, let me think of a good example. Okay, let's say Under Armour, for example. All kinds of great workout clothes. It's for the people who are very performance minded, right? They want to go work out hard. They want to do intense things. They want to get really fit. If they started talking about, things that appealed to, I don't know, like they're not going to post something about, hey, instead of working out today, why don't you go Netflix and chill? Like, totally off brand, right? So we want to make sure that everything that we're putting on social media communicates directly to the people that we want to connect to. And that means by nature, you're going to post things that will turn off the people who do not fit that particular demographic. And that's totally fine. When you're attracting the right people, by nature, you're also going to be repelling the wrong ones. So we have to be comfortable with that. And that's an area where a lot of people are not comfortable yet.
Yeah.
We kind of have this mindset of, oh, well, somebody's going to attack me online. Well, yeah, that's going to happen. Just get thick skin and get used to it. And that actually dovetails into kind of a bigger point on that. And that is, as you do start to get publicity, you start to get featured and you're highlighted as this expert, you absolutely are going to get attacked. We've kind of developed this mindset in society where like we love the underdog until we don't, right? They get to a certain point and then it's like, oh, like I hate that person. They're a fraud or they have stupid ideas or whatever. It's like, well, like you loved them a week ago. Like what changed? So we just have to be comfortable knowing that some people aren't going to like us or some people are going to attack us. And something I found useful in that, by the way, is thinking of it from the perspective of it's not really about you. There's people who are going to attack you. Nothing to do with the merits of the things you're posting or the positions you hold or anything. It's just because they are sad, bitter, angry people, right? Now, that's not to say that that's always the case. There certainly are cases where you're going to post something and it's dumb, like it's wrong. You made a mistake. Lord knows I've done it. That's justified criticism in those cases, but still learn from it, improve, get better as a result, but don't make it the end of the world, right?
Right.
The other thing with social media is you can use this in a very effective way to connect with the journalists. So, Twitter is one of the strongest places for that when it comes to PR. Twitter is essentially the media ecosystem. Almost every journalist is there and active. You'll also find producers, editors of various publications. They tend to be a little bit less active, but the journalists are especially active. So one of the things I like to do is, whenever I find a journalist on Twitter, I will absolutely follow them. And then I also use lists. Are you familiar with lists on Twitter?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I use lists, and I've got separate lists for different things. I've got a list just for media. And so aside from being connected with these folks, what I can actually do is go to that list. And then you have essentially a feed that's nothing but journalists. And that allows you to go in there and like we talked before about building and nurturing those relationships. You can now go in here and engage on their content, give it a like, give it a comment. If it's relevant to your audience, share it. One of the things that most people don't know, aside from the fact of how obscenely overworked most journalists are, is also the fact that they're actually measured not just on the quality of their work, but what kind of traffic does their content drive for that media outlet, right? Because that equates to eyeballs, which equates to more advertising revenue. So if you're out here and a journalist posts an article that they wrote, even if you're not featured in it or your client's not featured in it or whatever, if it's relevant to your audience, give it a share. That puts more eyeballs on their stuff. They're going to be appreciative of it. And it's just one more step in nurturing that relationship. And if you do this on a consistent basis, you're providing value to them. When you pitch them, they're a hell of a lot more likely to open your email and be receptive to it. So this is one of the big things that I really do is I go out and intentionally connect with the right journalists, the ones who are relevant to me and my clients. And then I engage on their content. I look for ways to help them. I share their content on social media. If we're publishing an article somewhere, whether it's on a site that we own or a piece of publicity that we're getting for a client, we'll try to incorporate links to those other journalists' content because it brings more value to the audience because now they've got additional data, additional resources that they can consume, but it's also providing value to that other journalist that you're linking to. And, this is a really important thing because like I said, most media outlets are struggling financially these days. The internet was kind of like a catch-22 for the media industry. It was great because it gave everyone access to all of this information. But also when the internet first became a thing that people started using, I mean, it's been around for since the 80s, really. But it really took off. I guess we're kind of showing our age here. It took off in like around the mid 90s. That's when I really first started using it on a large scale. when it first came out and for a really long time, most things were free and people began to expect most things for free. So all of these media outlets where back in the day, you would have to go to the store or go to the newsstand and pick up a physical magazine or a physical newspaper. And of course you had to pay for it, right? Nowadays, people want to just go to a website. They want it to be there for free. Well, you can't run a business for free. Like the revenue has to come from somewhere. So these media outlets are strapped for cash because of that. You know, people don't want to pay for things. And, you know, there's a lot of media outlets out there that have paywalls up, which is fine. They also have a lot of advertising. And, you know, you've seen some of the sites. They're just plastered with ads. So they're trying to make money, but they're struggling because everyone expects stuff for free. And then, you know, at the same time, in conjunction with that, you've got tons of other content creators who are putting out all kinds of stuff for free. So it's kind of, you know, they're in a bad spot. So they're really, really pressuring the journalists. So anything that you can do to help those journalists and to help those outlets, that puts you in a better spot.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And by the way, full disclosure, I love your opinion that you share on social media. It's very,
thank you.
Like you mentioned, you stay in your area and you have a strong opinion on most of the things. I love reading those actually. Other, you know, since this content creators, this uptake of social media, etc., what has happened is influencer marketing has kicked in, right? So there's a lot of debate between influencer marketing and media relation. So what do you think? What is your take on it? What are the benefits of media relation versus influencer marketing?
I think they go hand in hand. So PR, I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, if you think about it, a journalist is an influencer too, right? They've got their own audience. They've got people that are following their work, either because they love it or because they hate it, especially if you delve into some of the political topics. But influencers are really very similar. They are out there. They've got a big audience because of their views. And a lot of times, if you can play your cards right, you can leverage influencer marketing to then help your PR efforts, right? So if you've got these big people, these big influencers who already have an audience, they've already got a lot of visibility, and you can get them talking about you and what you're doing, that helps you with your PR efforts because the journalist is going to see that, right? Whether it's just by the nature of them scrolling through their own feed or by, you know, including them in that conversation in some way. Or if you pitch them and then they come and search specifically for you, right? Because they're going to search Google. They're probably going to go and search you on social media as well. So if you start doing influencer marketing, whether it's, you know, just you happen to know somebody or know a few people who are influencers and you get them to help you, or you hire somebody to handle influencer marketing for you, that can really give you a boost to your PR efforts because it's gonna further validate your credibility, your authority status, and it's going to create a lot more visibility for you to put you in front of the right people.
Right. I've never heard like that like that before, because I thought there's always a debate versus debate going on between media relation and influencer marketing. Right. So most businesses nowadays also, it's old things, right? Press conferences and events, which companies do, brands do. What is your advice for businesses to make the most out of such media opportunities, like press conferences and events?
The audio cut out a little bit there. Did you ask what's the best way to leverage the PR that you get?
Yeah, out of press conferences and events.
Yeah. Okay. So are you talking just specifically press conferences and events or just PR in general?
In general, PR, like for example, a company is participating in an event. How can they leverage that event to get maximum attention via PR?
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're participating in an event, first of all, it depends on what kind of participation are we talking about, right? Are you a sponsor of the event? Are you speaking at the event? Like, is it some other thing? That's going to play a big role in determining what to do with it then, right? So if you're sponsoring an event, there's not really a lot that you can do with that, right? You'll get visibility to the attendees of the event, but beyond that, it's probably not going to do a lot. Obviously, the event will be putting out their own press releases and whatnot, and they'll probably mention you because you're a sponsor. But where you really start to see the impact is when you can be a speaker at an event, right? So now you're on stage. Well, clearly you're on stage because you're an expert. And these other people who are presumably your peers in the industry have essentially vetted you. Otherwise, you would not be up there speaking to them. So right out of the gate, you've got that authority status. So there's a ton of things you can do from a content perspective. You can write, like text-based posts. You can talk about it. You can do it in video, right? So TikTok, YouTube, whatever, Instagram Reels, Facebook Reels, although Facebook is essentially dying at this point. But, you can do a ton of content. You can kind of hint at some of the things you're going to talk about during this presentation. You can maybe extract little nuggets of wisdom that you're going to talk about. And then what you're doing is you're actually doing two things. You are sharing valuable content that is useful to the people who are seeing your posts, but you're also creating that kind of FOMO, right? It's that fear of missing out. And by showing them what kind of stuff you're going to be talking about at this event, it gives them a little glimpse into what kind of knowledge you're able to share, which makes them more interested in potentially going to that event, which again, then helps you because you're helping the event organizers, which makes you more valuable to them. So this whole thing, I think you're seeing kind of the trend here is like when you're always adding value to everyone around you, it makes you more valuable, which then makes them want to elevate you more, right?
Right.
So that's kind of leading up to the event. Then during the event, one of the things that I find really useful is just while you're out there, walking the floor, networking, doing whatever you're doing, make sure to connect with the other people, talk about what you're going to be talking about, tell them you're going to be speaking, get them excited and engaged, and then they come to your actual presentation, right? Because we've all been to events. There's tons and tons of speakers. You can't see all of them. You want to get the most people possible in your session. And by actually engaging with the people, where this is where I see a lot of people go wrong, is they just think, oh, I'm above that. I'm so important. Everybody should just want to see me. And I'm not going to talk to anybody. I'm just going to get on stage, do my thing. And everybody should just want to see that. Look, that's not how it works. When you really engage and provide value from day one, from minute one throughout the event, you're going to get exponentially better results just across the board, but especially you're going to get more people in the audience. Now, that's a really important thing because A, you get to impact more people. And that's why we're doing this thing. We've all got a mission, whatever it is.
Right.
If you can impact more people, your mission is more effective. But the other cool thing about that is the more people that show up in your audience, they're at most events, they're shooting photos, right? They're shooting video. If you've got a packed room, that's powerful, right? Every time I speak at an event, the rooms are packed. And that's because of those things that I'm doing. People want to come and see that. So the more that you can do that, the more impact you're going to have. So then following the event, most of the times these event organizers will give you the video of your presentation afterwards. Usually it takes some time to get it. My most recent one that I spoke at was the Military Influencer Conference. They actually didn't record the presentations last year. But typically what would happen is a few weeks after the event, because they had dozens and dozens of speakers, there's typically like 1,000, 1,500 people at these events. So it takes them some time to get that video kind of cataloged and organized and edited and all of that. But then that video, you can go and post that on YouTube. You can chop it up into smaller nuggets, turn it into tons of social media content. You can extract little bits of wisdom out of there, turn that into text posts, all of those photos. And then you get a few of these. I mean, a single presentation could easily be turned into a few hundred pieces of content. So now, in addition to the authority status you have just from being on stage among your peers, you've got all of this content that you can constantly share. And in that, you're providing value, you're teaching people something, but you've now got this library of content. You can share it constantly, and you're more active on social. So now you're in front of people more, and it further boosts your brand. It boosts your visibility. And then, of course, that leads to engagement. Well, the more engagement there is, now the more other people that see your content. right? So it just kind of creates this snowball effect where it just builds upon itself.
Right, absolutely. The common trend which I can see is how much efforts are required to keep this engine running. So that's why there are few experts whom we can consider really as experts in these kind of fields. It takes humongous efforts to execute these kind of things. You can talk all about it, we can plan all about it, but executing is really really tough. Fantastic, cool. My next question is, it's you have touched upon this, but I really want to hear from your experience. What are some, if there are any creative tactics to getting some media coverage on tight budgets for brands? I would love to hear that.
Yeah. So I'll give you one that I've been doing for a while, and I absolutely love this. We talked before about how journalists are always overworked.
Right.
When they're working on a story, they need experts. They need people to interview, to cite as authorities on that topic. So, but at the same time, often it's hard for them to find the right people. So one of the things I like to do is I had a custom audience built in Facebook ads that targeted all of the employees of all of the major media outlets. So when something would pop off in the news, I would take either an article that I've written, whether it's on my own website or somewhere else, or a piece of publicity that I was featured in on a relevant topic to whatever that news story is, and then run ads with that piece of content to all of those media employees, which is now putting this expert who's already been cited in the media or has already shared his views right in front of them. So if they're working on a story and here's this expert who's already been cited, who else would you need to reach out to, right? And that's a very cost-effective and very scalable solution to get in front of a lot of these journalists. So that's a great way to go. Another way to go is to take a kind of controversial position on something. That's something I am good at. I happen to enjoy doing it as well. But when you do that, because look, people don't want to hear the same shit over and over and over. Case in point, we had a client who had some thoughts on a particular financial topic, and we pitched this story to a major media outlet. And the response we got back, which as I'm not in the financial industry, I would not have known this, but we pitched the story, and that particular journalist, who I happen to have a great relationship with, so this didn't hurt me or anything like that. But when we pitched him the story, he's like, look, that's the same things I'm hearing from a million other people. He's like, I need a different angle. And that just highlights the importance of having something unique. You have to take a controversial, it doesn't always have to be controversial, right? It just has to be different. It has to be something that is going to get somebody's attention. But then when you can tie it to something going on in the news, right? Like right now, what's everybody talking about? SVB and Signature Bank. And then tangentially off of that, there's all kinds of financial topics. You can talk about credit. You can talk about, like right now, there's more credit card debt by the average American than there ever has been in history. So you can tie SVB to that credit problem and then pitch a particular angle. Let's say you're a credit repair expert. You tie those two things together, and now you've got your pitch, right? So you have to find a way to get people emotionally engaged. That's what the media is about. And that's why we see so many shitty clickbait headlines, right? That often, if we're being completely honest, are not accurate. It's because they're trying to get that emotional hook. They're trying to get people engaged because they need people to click through. Now, I will be very clear in saying, don't make something up or don't create conflict or something when there doesn't need to be, when there's no value in that. Because then if that's your whole thing, that's kind of like the radio shock jocks back in the day. You just keep being more and more outrageous just for the sake of getting attention. That kind of creates a downward spiral where eventually people are going to get sick of it. They're going to get bored of that, and you're going to start to sound kind of like a clown. So that's what I would see there. And then, again, I would come back to the whole building the relationships thing. The better you know these journalists, more importantly, the better they know you. That's where you start to see real traction. I've got I've got journalists because of what I've done where I don't even really have to pitch them. I can just call them and say, hey, I've got, this expert on XYZ. Are you working on anything where he might fit? Right. So those are some of the things that I see from kind of a tactics perspective, and in a low cost scenario that can really help you if you're doing the DIY thing.
Absolutely. The Facebook ads thing, I don't know if that is not creative, then what is? That just blew my mind. I bet I have to go back and play this video again to understand that properly. But it was amazing actually. That's
Thank you.
Just hitting at the right moment. Right. So my next question is again, when you are taking the DIY approach to PR, what are some of the common mistakes you want to keep an eye out for?
One of the most common mistakes is badgering the journalist. So I will see people pitch a journalist. And so I actually have kind of a unique perspective because in addition to being a publicist, I also happen to be a journalist. I mean, you've seen, I've got columns at God knows how many different media outlets, major media outlets at that, Entrepreneur, Benzinga, Inman, a number of places. So I actually get a lot of pitches from people as well. So what I see happen often is someone will pitch a story and then they'll follow up and then they'll follow up and then they'll follow up and follow up and follow up and follow up. And eventually I just have to block them because they're either just hammering the same thing. And it's like, look, if it wasn't a fit the first time, it's probably not a fit the second time. And it's certainly not a fit the third time or the 906 other times. Right. So that falls back to what we talked about before. This is not a numbers game. The number of emails that you send is not going to help you, whether it's the total number of people you hit or the number of times you hit each person. So my rule of thumb for this is I will email them once. I'll typically wait about a week. I'll follow up. If I don't get a response, I just make the assumption that either they're too busy, it's not a fit. I don't know. Maybe they hate me. Who knows? Whatever it is, like it's not going to happen this time. And then what I'll do is I'll regroup, find a different angle, find a different pitch, and come back later, right? But when you hammer them, and I see a lot of people really abuse this when it comes to automation. I'm a big fan of automation. There's so many things you can do with it, but these damn automated email sequences where it just keeps sending and sending and sending and sending until you reply or block them, like that is going to not only not work, but it's going to actually destroy your potential relationship with that journalist.
True.
So that's the big thing. Beyond that, when we pitch, we want to get to the hook. Why is somebody going to care? That's the first thing you want to hit. So I like to open up with what I call a startling statistic. This is something that's going to get their attention. So I might open up with, let's say, okay, so in the media right now, everybody's talking about, we mentioned before, SVB and Signature Bank and a few others are like teetering on the edge of collapse as well. Right. We're in interesting times right now. But there's a little known detail that most people have not seen, and that is with the FDIC, which is the part of the government that it's the Federal Depositors Insurance. I think C is corporation. I forget exactly how it's structured, but essentially this is part of the government and it's insurance for your deposits at the bank. Now the FDIC insures up to $250,000 of your deposit at any given bank. Something that's recently come to light is the fact that the FDIC only has the funds to cover, I think it was about 3% of the deposits in the United States. So if these banks started collapsing, FDIC can't do a damn thing. Like they're not going to go very far. So if you were to open up with that, like, according to the FDIC, they only have the funds to cover 3.26% of all deposits in the US. Here's how that affects business owners, right? That's a hook that's going to get somebody's attention. It's a hook that's going to get them emotionally engaged. So we open with something powerful like that. Then from there, we talk about the person. So Bill Smith is an expert in banking regulations and risk management. and has identified 3 things that every entrepreneur needs to know in order to protect themselves from the potential chaos that's coming, blah, blah, blah. Right? So now you've said why we give a shit about who this person is and what their opinion is on the topic. Right there, boom, boom. You're already in a really solid spot. From there, we'll typically roll into something that we use called the core positioning statement. So we will distill down. It's kind of like, in a sense, it's the hero's journey, right? We take everything about who you are, what you do, why you do it, and we distill that into a nice, tight little paragraph, usually just a few sentences, that essentially says, like it tells them why you're doing what you're doing and how you are uniquely qualified to be the expert on this particular topic, right? And this just gives them more insight into the person, and it also gives them an emotional connection, because now you know this person. You don't know a lot, but you know enough. And that's going to either let you connect with them or not, if it's not relevant to you. But for the right people, there's something there to connect to. There's a humanization to it.
Right.
And then from there, we roll into a close. Now, when a close, I've seen so many press releases, so many pitches, so many things where there's no call to action. It's, hey, here's all this information, blah, just vomit it on the screen, right? And then they just leave it open-ended, right? We know that people are lazy, they're distracted, they don't pay attention, they've got short attention spans. If you don't actively tell them, hey, I want you to do this, 99 times out of 100, they're not going to do this, right? So I close, after the core positioning statement, I will close with some kind of call to action. Now, I'm careful in how I word that. I structure it in such a way that it's not coming off desperate. Like, you have to be careful how you're positioning it, right? You have to position it from a position of authority, right? Think about it like this: traffic stop. You ever had a cop walk up and be like, hey, do you think maybe like you could give me your license if it's not too much of a problem? Like, no, they're like, license or registration, right? So same idea with this, right? Just take the assumption that, hey, I've got this great thing. If you want it, I'm here. If not, cool, right? You want to be a little bit insouciant. So I'll say something like, if you feel like this is a fit, let me know and I'll make arrangements for him to be interviewed by you, right? So you're almost assuming the close. And it's, in my opinion, it's as simple as that. You hook them emotionally, you tell them why they give a shit about this person, you explain the person, and then you close, whether it's yourself or whether it's a client, right? So that's the approach on a pitch.
Absolutely. You actually, with that single answer, you answered several questions which are supposed to come. But anyway, let me just pick up a couple of things which I want to talk about. Local media outlet relationships. Businesses operating in a certain area like Michigan or anywhere for that matter. How can businesses focus on building relationship with local media outlets?
So that's a lot easier than it is when it comes to national media, but it's also got some drawbacks. So there's a ton of media outlets everywhere, and they all need content. And this is something that a lot of people need to know, and most don't really think about it. The media needs you just as much as you need them, because they've got to produce this content. It has to appeal to their audience. It has to be valuable. Well, in order for those criteria to be met, they need valuable sources. They need people they can interview who can share their unique insights, right? Because if, let's say your local news channel wants to do an article about, SEO or something, right? You're going to be able to provide insight that they never could, no matter how much research they did, because they just don't have that knowledge of the industry. They don't have the technical experience. They don't have the exposure to what goes on in the industry. They don't have the relationships to get the context of things. So they need you. When it comes to your local, right? So I'm here in Tampa. We've got all these Tampa-based media outlets. We've got Fox 13, I'm drawing a blank now. we've got, I think, 3 or 4 TV stations here, like major ones. And then, of course, there's some smaller things, too. We've got numerous newspapers. We've got the Tampa Bay Business Journal. We've got a couple of other magazines. We've got various things. So they absolutely are going to cover local stuff if it's a good fit for them. And because you're local, you've got, a leg up. Obviously, you can pitch media anywhere. Like I could pitch a news channel in Michigan or Ohio or New York or wherever. And I have pitched and gotten placements in local outlets for clients who are not local to that outlet. But if you're coming in as a local, it definitely gives you a leg up. You've got that local aspect of the story. So the audience is going to care more. When it comes to any of these outlets, the first thing you could do is go check out their website. On some of them, they will have the contact information for the journalists. They will have the contact information for the producers, for the editors. If you can't find those, because some don't, like I was pitching something for a client out in Philly recently, and not a single one of the TV stations had any contact information for anyone listed anywhere. And it was kind of a nightmare. We did end up getting a lot of coverage for them. It worked out well, but it took a lot more work to get there. But in the event that the media outlet doesn't have contact information, what you can do is head over to Twitter, right? We talked about that one before. Find those journalists over there, connect with them there. Head over to LinkedIn. The beauty of LinkedIn is that once you are connected with somebody, typically you have access to their email address now, right? If you click on that little section underneath their profile picture and banner and all that, you'll see it'll expand out, right? And you'll have their email address right there. You just want to be careful not to go overboard. Don't email them every day. Don't pitch them every day. Pitch them when it's relevant. Pitch them when it makes sense, and make sure you pitch the right person. You want to dig through the site. If you don't already know who covers what topics, spend some time digging through the site. Spend some time watching the shows. Figure out what type of content each journalist covers, and then pitch the right person, because that's one area I see people go wrong, is they will pitch the entire staff of a particular media outlet, right? And think about how that looks from the journalist perspective, right? It's like, oh, I'm one guy of 20 different people. Like I'm just a number to this journalist or to this this entrepreneur or this publicist or whatever. It kind of puts a bad taste in their mouth. Absolutely. So what you want to do is same as before, you build those relationships, but because you've got that local angle, you're in a lot better place. And then there's also other tools you can use. I know you're familiar with a bunch of them from the SEO industry. There's tools that you can use for finding emails like hunter.io. I'm drawing a blank on some of the ones the SEO industry uses. What else am I forgetting besides Hunter?
Hunter, there's Zoom Info. There's a lot of tools which give you the contact details of people.
There's also tools that are built specifically for the PR industry. You've got tools like Cision, Meltwater, Muckrack. These are not going to be realistic for most people unless you're in the PR industry. It's probably not going to work for you. Put it in context. Meltwater is one that we have access to, and that's going to run you for a fairly small size membership level. You're probably looking at about $20,000 a year, right? So some of these PR tools are not going to be a fit for the average person doing their own PR, but a lot of the tools from the SEO industry, like we talked about, are solid. You can also go and we talked about connecting with them on social media, but you can also go and Google, right? If you go look up on Google, there's a lot of cool ways and you may have even covered some of these cool search operators that you can use to find specific data in Google. But if you dig around, there's a good chance you can find the contact info for any journalist. You can call the station and try and find a journalist's contact information. There's really a lot of ways that you can get that, but once you get in contact with them, stay in contact with them, nurture that relationship, and you're going to be in a really good spot.
Absolutely. Another tool which I just remembered was HARO, HARO, Help a Report Route. A lot of people talk about that.
A lot of people talk about it, but I personally hate Haro with a passion.
Okay.
And the reason for that is it used to be good. In fact, Haro was where I got my first feature in the media. I've still got a stack about that big of newspapers where I was literally on the front page of the business section of the Tampa Tribune. And that came through Haro. For those who aren't familiar with Haro, essentially it was created by this guy. I can't remember his name now, but he was a very famous publicist in the PR industry, and he created the tool. And essentially, a journalist who was looking for an expert on a particular topic would put a little thing into the system, and then 3 times a day, Haro would send out emails to everybody who subscribed, and it would be a list of journalists who are looking for experts on various topics. And what you would do is you would click on that, and you would reply to that particular one, and it like obfuscated the email, so you wouldn't see the journalist's email unless they replied back to you.
Right.
And then so you would send your pitch based on whatever they were looking for, and if they liked what you had to say, they would reply back to you, and then communication would ensue, and hopefully you get featured in the media. That's how it went down for me. She was looking for, this will tell you how long ago it was. This was an article about whether or not businesses should be using the internet. Right. So, but she reached out. We ended up getting together locally at a coffee shop here. She interviewed me for about an hour or so. And then, the newspaper came out. And of course, I went and bought every damn copy I could find. But over the years, Haro has kind of become a dumpster fire. And in part, I blame the SEO industry, because if there's anything that for the audience who's not familiar, like that's where I came from before I pivoted to focus on PR. We're really good at what we do. We're really smart. We find creative ways to do things, but we also tend to destroy things. That's where the whole panda and penguin updates came from, because SEO people destroyed shit. They've done the same thing to Haro. So Haro has degraded in quality. It got bought by somebody. I can't for the life of me remember who it was, but I've been seeing.
I think Session bought it. Session.
Did they? Oh, well, then
Yeah.
If that's the case, then that must have been more recent. They were bought by somebody else before that.
Yeah.
But essentially, the quality of the queries coming out are garbage lately. Like, sure, there's some journalists in there, but at the same time, there's also a lot of SEOs who are putting out queries, and then they're taking that information, the responses that they're getting from people, and they're just using that for free content. They're not citing anybody. So, I mean, on one hand, it's brilliant, but on the other hand, it's shady as hell. So there's a lot of garbage queries out there. So it's really easy to waste your time, and especially because they allow people to post anonymous queries, right? So you have no idea what publication it's for.
Right.
So I don't find a lot of value in Haro. Most of the publicists that I know, and I'm in some pretty big groups. I mean, obviously I've got a lot of my personal friends and connections, but we're also in private groups for the PR industry with, some of these groups are like, 20, 30,000 people. So you can get a pretty good sense for what the industry thinks of things when you see the posts in these groups. And, the general consensus among the industry is that Haro is pretty much garbage. You can sometimes find that diamond in the rough that turns into a great win, but there's a lot better uses of your time and energy.
Absolutely. I'll take your word on it. Right. My last question related to PR before we close this is storytelling. What role does storytelling play in PR, and how it can be effectively utilized on a budget?
That's a great question, and it is probably one of the most powerful parts of your list of tactics that you're going to use when it comes to PR. So we talked earlier about the core positioning statement, which is the distillation of that story, right? So essentially you're taking this nice compact little story and using that to generate an emotional response. Case in point, I had pitched a particular story to a journalist a while back. Since then, I've built a great relationship with this journalist. Like, we talk even beyond PR, like we just talk in general, like we've become friends. But when I pitched her this story, which she loved, and she ended up doing a full feature story on this, which put my client on the front page of a major business publication. after the interview, because I had, leading up to that, I was like, well, if you've got some time, let's, after we're done interviewing my client, why don't we hang on that call for a little bit and just kind of chat, get to know each other? She's like, yeah, I'd love to. Let's do it. So we started talking, and I told, we got into the conversation of my backstory, which, you talked about in the beginning. And she's like, oh my God, that is such a powerful story. She's like, can I do a story on you? And that came from storytelling, right? And it was just a conversation. It was me talking about, what had happened. But the key there is, it wasn't, hey, here's why I'm awesome. It was, here's something shitty that happened to me, and how that led to me getting into this, but then also these other things, right? So I know you know about this part, but your audience doesn't. So one of the things her and I were talking about was, when I had that health crisis and I spent, the 2 years on my deathbed, obviously I was in a really bad place, emotionally, because of that, because, I was in massive pain. Everything in my body that could go wrong was like, it was like everything was just a mess. And in doing that, I got to the point where I really understood how people struggled with, mental health issues, and even got to the point of suicide. And then it was right around that time that one of the toughest Marines that I ever served with took his life. And for me, that was a really big eye opener, because, if he could do that, and here I am going through it, right? It could happen to anybody. Right. And because of that, I then started being very open about these kind of things. I started talking about what I was going through and how it was impacting me. And then that led to me counseling other veterans who were struggling. And I know that as a result of that, like I've saved a certain number of people who were on the verge of suicide. I also know there's an undetermined number of other people that I've impacted. And I'll never know what that number is. But I mean, I've constantly got messages from people, text messages, DMs, whatever, all kinds of stuff, saying how me being open about this and talking about it, and, encouraging people to seek help and talk to, whether it's a professional or at least a friend, something, how that impacted them and helped them, get out of their situation or overcome whatever adversity they were facing. Right. So when her and I were talking about the situation, it wasn't about me. It was about how this situation actually had a silver lining that led to these other people being helped. So it was about the value. It wasn't about me. It was about the impact and what had come out of that. And that's what we want to be careful with when we're using storytelling, is not to make it about ourselves and how awesome we may think we are. It's right. More about, the impact, the other people who we're helping, how their lives are going because of this stuff. And when you frame it in that perspective, it's really focused on the value and not a selfish purpose. And that's a game changer. And that's where storytelling becomes very powerful. Now, when it comes to storytelling, one of the really important things we have to look at here is how it affects the brain. So when we start using storytelling, it activates a part of our brain that is not normally activated, right? And then in doing so, it triggers the production of a hormone called oxytocin. Now, for anyone who's not a doctor, oxytocin is essentially the hormone that causes your body to trust. So when you're triggering oxytocin, you're now causing people who are listening to your story to trust you more, which now enables you to get further in the goals that you're trying to achieve, right? Whether it's to get that piece of media, that publicity out there, or whether it's something else, to convince somebody of something, to get somebody to do something or to not do something, whatever it is. Storytelling is immensely powerful because of that.
Fantastic. What a beautiful answer to that question. I never expected. It took a lot of turns, which were beautiful turns, by the way. Right. My next question was about your past, but I could see that you get pretty emotional talking about it. We can skip that question. But I would like to, why I add that question is because I ask every guest, I invite very selective people on my show who have a beautiful story. And I don't, personally, why I run this show is also because of that. I don't look at Elon Musk to get inspired. I look at real people who are in my life to get inspiration. So I've known your story for a long time. I've
Yeah.
seen how passionate you are about mental health and all that. So my question for you was, I keep calling you Sarge and, openly, and you have been Marine Corps. Now you are a leading CEO. I want to hear a little bit about that journey. You have seen the deepest of the deepest, and now you have a beautiful family, beautiful career, a personal brand, and you have done it on your own. So I want to hear some bit of it, if
Yeah.
you're okay with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I will add a little correction to that. I would not say I've done it completely on my own. I've definitely had some help from some awesome people in my life. But essentially the journey was, I grew up, we'll say in a challenging childhood. Ended up moving out relatively young. I think I was 16 when I moved out and rented my first house. I worked 2 jobs through high school, and then I went into the Marine Corps and deployed all over the world, did a bunch of really cool things with a bunch of awesome guys, got out, started my first business. That failed miserably. I lost everything, destroyed my credit, lost my house, lost 2 cars, burned through 6 figures of savings. Like it was a mess, which of course was not a great thing for my confidence. So I spent the next few years kind of recovering from that. It took a little bit longer to rebuild my confidence to the level where it should have been. And then I started my next company a few years later. Ran that for roughly a decade. And that was when I got hit with that health crisis. And then, of course, we talked about that, spent 2 years on the deathbed, lost everything again, and had to start over. And then when I did that, when I did start over, used PR, got back on the map, still ran the agency as a general full service agency for a little while. But then at some point I realized, well, shit, like everybody needs publicity. Everybody needs the kind of impact that I was able to create for myself in their own business. Because there's these awesome people out here. You and I know a bunch of them. They're
Right.
awesome. They provide tremendous value to their clients. They're great people. They help other people in the industry, but they don't have that authority status. They're not at the level that they should be. They're not achieving their potential just because nobody knows how awesome they are. So I was like, well, shit. All right, we need to focus on this one thing and help other people get this same thing that I've been able to do. That was when we pivoted to focusing on that. And then, we've been killing it there and starting to do some other things, creating some other opportunities. I've got some other businesses we're launching, which you and I should talk about. In fact, you and I have actually talked a little bit about one of the big ones that's coming up, but we need to chat a little bit more about that one soon. That one's not public yet, but along the way, I've had the pleasure to meet some awesome people and have these awesome people help me in the same way that, that I like to help people as well. Right. So up to a certain point in my life, I actually did try to do everything myself. And that comes from a lot of things. Part of it was trust. I had a rough childhood. I, spent some time, in some pretty bad places. So I had some trust issues. Also, there was a degree of ego, right? I don't need anybody. I can do everything myself. Both of those were the wrong position. But once I started kind of collaborating and letting people help me, it was a game changer. I met, good friend of mine, Shell Connor, has helped me tremendously. We connected in some Facebook group initially many years ago, and just kind of hit it off. And it was her. It was a veteran friend of mine, Michael Toothman, Rob. I've got a bunch of these people, and we connected, and we were like the early people in this group. We were like when this group was, God, I don't know, single digit members still. And now it's like 20,000 people or something crazy. Like we met and we hit it off, and we became like just family essentially, and have helped each other in tremendous ways along the way. And then there's, other people like Matt Andrews, great friend of mine. You've probably seen him on some of my content, engaging back and forth on social media. One of the smartest humans I have ever met, super smart, just brilliant businessman and an amazing people person, right? He's always helping people, connecting people. He's like this connector kind of guy, right? So these kinds of things happened, and it really put me in a very different position, because now you're not trying to do everything yourself. And the reality is, it's kind of crazy that it happened that late in life, when you consider that in the Marine Corps, you're never doing things on your own. You've got the team. You've got these, this group of guys who are literally willing to die for you, right? Like, so it shouldn't have taken that long for me to get to that mindset. But, we've all got our journey. We've all got reasons for, things happening the way they do. It played out the way it did. But once I made that change, it completely opened an entirely new world for me. I started working collaboratively with people, and I always like to be the person to help people, but I've always had a problem letting people help me. And that was we'll call that a mindset block, right? That was a flaw in my thinking. I know where it comes from. That's not something we really need to unpack, but I think to a degree we probably all have that to varying levels.
Absolutely.
But once I got that out of my head and started letting people help me, it allowed me to achieve a lot more. And I think part of the reason that most of us do that is because we feel like if we let someone help us in that way, that we didn't really earn it. We didn't really achieve the goal, that somebody else made it happen. And that's frankly bullshit, right? We all, think about it. When you help someone, you're not like, oh, hey, you didn't actually do that because I helped you. Right?
Absolutely.
So,
Right.
Yeah.
So I know Michael P. Toothman. I call him Doc. Actually, we have had some interesting conversations on Facebook and all that. Very interesting character. But all I can say is, I think you are a shining example for a lot of people. In not only professionally, as you, the way you carry yourself, the way you put out your opinions, and the way you present yourself to the world. It's amazing, and I really love seeing all the work you do. So that was my question about that. And one final question before we leave. This is a short one. I want you to tell about Spartan Media. What all you do for brands globally?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned before, it used to be a full service agency. We pivoted to focusing on PR. Now, we still do some of the things that we've done in the past, but everything that we do is in support of PR. So obviously there is directly the PR aspect, but we'll still do some things, like we don't do a lot of web design, but we will still build like a personal brand website, for example. We don't do SEO anymore, but we will do reputation management, which relies heavily on SEO. Social media, we're not doing the execution of that, but we will put together a strategy that the client can then implement. So essentially, it's everything that we do is about creating a particular perception of that person or that company. That's it in a nutshell.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Saj, for coming on the show. And it's over an hour, but I didn't know where the time went. I really loved all the insights, your story, everything. And thank you so much for your time. Have a great day.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. All right. So that was Jeremy Knuaff. Follow him on LinkedIn. If not possible, follow him on Facebook. Amazing stories he shares, amazing insights on PR, a lot of personal, professional stuff. So follow him. Check out Spartan Media also. If you're in the US, they can help you with the PR and building a brand. So that was episode 62. Amazing guests lined up for next 2 months. There are people who are going to come and talk about bullying in schools and colleges, and they use storytelling to tackle bullying. I can't wait to bring all these people on the show. I love doing the show. So see you next Thursday at 8:30 p.m. IST or 10 a.m. EST. This is Vivek signing off. See you all next week. Thank you.